The storyline surrounding USC football entering the 2024 season, their first season ever in the Big Ten after the Pac-12 disintegrated at the end of last season, is the defense, and a new staff that features the hiring of D'Anton Lynn as the defensive coordinator, Eric Henderson as the co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach, Matt Entz as the linebackers coach, and Doug Belk as the defensive backs coach. They are taking over from Alex Grinch, one of the worst defenses in USC Trojans football history. A defense that allowed 34.4 points per game, that allowed 49 points to California, 34 to Utah with Bryson Barnes, that let Notre Dame hang a 50 burger on them, although most of that was due to turnovers and special teams, that gave Colorado one of their most successful games of the season on offense, a team that let Arizona State with Drew Pine and Cameron Scadaboo torch their defensive backs and perimeter players. And Oregon and Bo Nix were like a cat to USC's defense being a mouse. And we don't even want to get into what Dylan Johnson and Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and that elite offensive line did to the Trojans last year. Last year's defense was a disaster. We all know about that. I would talk about it more because, like Iowa's offense, it's so bad that it's almost fun or entertaining to talk about. But that's the old USC, because in this spring game, we got to see better defensive play than anything I have seen from a Lincoln Riley defense so far at USC. And I didn't watch Lincoln Riley's spring games at Oklahoma because I wasn't as into the sport when he was at Oklahoma. And keep in mind, for many of you, I'm only 21, and I only got interested into college football around the 2020 season, more interested in 2021, and 2022 and last year, 2023, is when I really started to dive deep and expand my horizons outside of just the Big Ten, which this is just primarily a Big Ten channel. That's why I'm only covering the Big Ten spring games right now, but I try and cover other teams, other conferences. I'm obsessed with looking at statistics and data from past seasons, past teams. In fact, there is going to be a big video this summer that documents data from the past decade, if not more, of college football, because I have some interesting findings that I want to talk about. But I don't want to ramble about that. However, that point about data ties in to what we saw in USC spring game. Now, it is just a spring game, but the previous two spring games, where Lincoln Riley's defense in the spring game, USC's defense, they're given 24 points out of the gate. 2 quarters, 15 minutes. The final 2 minutes are untimed. And from what I gathered from the highlight package that I watched, the final 2 minutes was really longer than 2 minutes. It's just Lincoln Riley wanted to see what the offense could do, let them finish their drive, and then would end the really quarter. You could call it a half because there were only 2 quarters, but they were quarter-length halves, if that makes sense. I know to you USC fans it does. I'm just trying to over-explain because that's better than under-explaining. The defense forced multiple turnovers. They did better at the lines of scrimmage than they had in the past 2 seasons, and they seemed to make adjustments because the defense would force a turnover or they would stymie the offense, and then the offense would adapt and respond, which makes sense because that's Lincoln Riley's specialty. He is a genius offensive coordinator, offensive mind, and quarterback developer. Miller Moss threw 2 picks, but outside of those 2 picks, he was throwing dimes, bullet passes, perfectly lofting passes. He looks like he right now, as of this minute, is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. We haven't gotten through all the spring games, of course, and Dylan Gabriel might have something to say about that. Maybe Will Howard, maybe Drew Aller, maybe Aiden Childs. All those players I mentioned are either proven players in the collegiate ranks, or in the case of Aller and Childs, they were highly recruited out of high school, and we know that they're talented. And maybe there are other quarterbacks who could compete for that number 1 spot, but given the resume that Riley has, given what we saw from Miller Moss in the Holiday Bowl, what we've seen from him in past spring games, in this one, I very much favor him, and I've said this in a live stream of mine, to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten. And I think you saw that in the spring game. And yet, the defense was confusing him at times. This unit looked well coordinated. They don't have that high ceiling, or I even think even close to the physicality they need to be a great defense in the Big Ten. But again, it's year one under D'Anton Lynn. In fact, he's only been here working with the defense for a few months. So just imagine what happens in summer and fall camp and workouts, what strides can be made. Think about that. And think about a year from now, entering 2025. This defense will probably take leaps and bounds step forward compared to what it was at the end of the Alex Grinch era. By the way, USC fan or not, why? Can someone explain to me why Wisconsin and Luke Fickell hired Alex Grinch? I know that he recruits well in the secondary, and I've heard that he's a decent teacher of the game, and like he actually has football IQ, and he might be good at developing individual players. But still, why make the hire? Let me know if the reasons that I made are why you think Luke Fickell in Wisconsin hired him. If you think it's a different reason, I don't necessarily know. I wouldn't have made that move. But then again, I'm not a coach. I'm just some commentator guy on YouTube sharing my thoughts. And where I want to start with my thoughts, diving in, is USC's offense. Lincoln Riley himself said that Miller Moss is the clear leader in the quarterback competition, and he played well on Saturday, April 20th, which is when the spring game took place. Jayden Maiava, I hope that's how you say his last name, he had some bright spots managing the quarterback position. He made some nice passes, and he's clearly a talented young player. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore this coming season for USC, and he originally committed to go to Georgia until Lincoln Riley and the Trojans and his staff brought him in to Los Angeles. And I can see why Lincoln Riley wants him in the quarterback room. And I think that's mainly because, Malachi Nelson went over to Boise State, and I don't know if the rumors are necessarily true, but I heard that he lost to a walk-on in the quarterback room and that he just wasn't doing well and needed to go somewhere else and get another shot. And I think Maiava, again, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, I think that he is going to work nicely. And Riley said that he's doing well, still learning the playbook. It's a big jump, but that he's going in the right direction. And that's good. That means USC has quarterback depth, which is very important. And a Lincoln Riley team, honestly, will always have quarterback depth, whether it was Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams in 2021, whether it was Jalen Hurts and Spencer Rattler in 2019, whether it was Kyler Murray, I know just only 2018, but he was a workhorse, could run the ball, take hits, throw. Baker Mayfield in 2017 with Kyler Murray as his backup. You're always going to have quarterback depth and high-level quarterback play under Lincoln Riley, no matter where he goes. The issue is trench play. I think that we've learned in the past 2 years from Lincoln Riley being at USC that Bill Biedenbaugh was the reason behind the offensive line's success at Oklahoma, and not Lincoln Riley, because the trench play in 2022 was good. You had plenty of highly recruited and highly developed players that a lot of them came from the Clay Helton era, and then that offensive line lost a lot of their production and talent entering 23, and last year's offensive line was it was trash by USC standards. It was diarrhea at times. There were times where Caleb Williams had no time to throw and was immediately pressured, even by Group of 5 schools. And Caleb Williams knows how to command a pocket, maneuver the pocket. He knows how to escape, scramble, improvise. And yet there were times that he couldn't because, again, that was how bad the offensive line was. It got owned against any defense with physicality and with talent. And USC's defensive line, which we'll get into the defense in a few minutes here, but the other side of the ball, of the trenches, I mean, look, they allowed Colorado to run for over 100 yards. Trench play has been the ultimate kryptonite of most Lincoln Riley teams, but especially, I think without Bill Biedenbaugh, you're seeing that at USC under Riley at the offensive line position. I thought the O-line did a respectable job in the spring game, particularly in pass protection, but again, they're not exactly facing a defense and a defensive front that's a top 25 unit, or at this point, even close. I mean, the defense did well at turnovers, at defending the pass, and they didn't let the run game explode on them. But when you do a variation of two-hand touch, and granted in pass catching at least, you had to grab the receiver and then it was called down, it's hard to gauge physicality when you do that. When you watch, whether it's Penn State or Michigan or Michigan State or Georgia, when you watch live tackling in a spring game, yes, that includes the chances of injury, but you can gauge the physicality of a team, and you know that team is really working and trying to make sure they perfect their physicality. This is not saying that USC is going to be soft like they were the previous 2 seasons entering this year. Again, the defense made great strides. The O-line did a respectable job, and the wide receivers, they're awesome. The Trojans lose Taj Washington, and they also lose Brennan Rice. It doesn't matter. Deuce Robinson's going to be awesome. Zachariah Branch will be an All-American. Kyron Hudson, awesome. Mekhi Lemon looked good at wide receiver. I saw him make some catches and run some good routes. And I think that the Trojans will miss Caleb Williams on offense, but because of Lincoln Riley, this offense will remain strong. Quarterback will be a strength of question, and I've seen USC fans in my comment section agree with me on this and also educate me on this. The offensive line, and I would even say to a certain degree tight end, part of the reason that Ohio State became more physical in 2022 and 2023 compared to 21 wasn't just because of defensive improvements, or in 2022 at least compared to the previous year, improvements on the offensive line. It was also due to the fact that Cade Stover was just a more physical tight end than Jeremy Ruckert. He was just a more rugged player. And Stover helped Ohio State a lot in their quest for physicality. A quest which ultimately didn't lead them where they wanted to go, but it got them darn close to winning it all, despite not winning their conference in 2022, and they only lost by 6 to the national champions in 2023. If USC and Lincoln Riley want to keep their identity without pivoting, which I think to a certain degree Ryan Day has done at Ohio State, and it hasn't exactly produced the best results. It's exchanged offensive firepower for defensive firepower. If you want to keep the offensive firepower high while raising defensive firepower, and you can do that, Michigan under Jim Harbaugh did that. This is not a zero-sum game. That's something Kirk Ferentz at Iowa believes in, and it's wrong. Offense being good and defense being good at the same time as possible. It's not a zero-sum game where if your offense is elite, your defense will be trash. That's a myth. What has to be done is better tight end play, better offensive line play, and on defense, better linebacker play, and better D-line play. You do not need to trade one for the other. And if USC can be physical while maintaining their offensive prowessness, they can be what Ohio State was in 2022 or 2021 if they utilize their defensive talent properly. And this staff on defense can certainly do that. But before we dive into the defense and talk about what especially a good performance their secondary had, I want to thank my Patreon members for sponsoring this channel and video. Thanks to Crash2488 for being a Heisman Patreon member. And he's getting a signed College Football with Sam t-shirt in his mailbox as soon as I can get it to him. So if you want that, all you have to do is be a Heisman member for 6 months, and you will get free and signed College Football with Sam merchandise. And you can also direct message me on Patreon and give me content suggestions. Thanks to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and Connor Little OH for being All-American members. And thanks to Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janaisha Cockrell for being All-Conference members. You typically won't see me shout out my patrons in the middle or beginning of a video. You'll always see me do that at the end, though, unless I've done it in the middle. But I'm always going to do it at least once. I just felt like doing it today. So outside of that, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so that you can get notified when I release more college football content. And if you want to support the channel in another way outside of my Patreon or super chatting me, you can purchase from my merchandise store directly along with my Patreon. The link to that is in the description and in the pinned comment. Now let's circle back and talk about the defense. The defensive backs were electric in the spring game. They made critical interceptions and pass breakups against elite quarterbacks and wide receivers. They guarded the wide receivers and covered them well, at least compared to the previous 2 seasons. Again, last year's defense for USC, let me read you these numbers and let them sink in. If you're a USC fan, you can just roll your eyes in the back of your head and try and forget what happened. If you're not a USC fan, you probably don't even know these statistics. The defense for USC allowed 246.4 passing yards per game and 2.4 passing touchdowns per game, and opponents to complete 64% of their passes. Now, that's bad, but that's not terrible. I mean, there are secondaries that have far worse statistics than that. What's bad is when you look at USC's run defense, allowing 38.9 rush attempts per game. USC ran the ball and allowed opponents to run the ball on them for both 4.8 yards per carry. USC on average allowed 1.9 rushing touchdowns per game defensively and 186.5 rushing yards per game. Michigan will play USC this year. They didn't play them last year, though. I can only imagine if last year's Michigan rushing attack, or if 2022's Michigan rushing attack, faced this USC defense, what would happen. 2022's Michigan rushing attack might have ran for over 500 yards on this defense. I mean, they ran for over 400 on Penn State, who had a much better run defense in 2022 than USC did last season. The Trojans allowed 34.4 points per game, which is 121st nationally. And despite those horrific defensive stats, USC finished the year with a higher scoring offense. They scored 41.8 points per game as opposed to 41.4 the prior season, had a tougher strength of schedule. I thought the offense personally was worse compared to last season at the lines of scrimmage, but that may be due to a variety of complicated reasons. Part of me thinks that USC didn't face the same caliber of great defenses when they played them. Oregon, I think, had a little bit of a paper tiger defense, although they were still great. And Washington's defense was good, had a great ceiling, but ultimately was not this elite unit. And Utah's defense was depleted this year. When USC faced Utah and Oregon State in 2022, I mean, those defenses were vicious that year. I would say Oregon State's was great, and I'd say Utah's that year, they probably had a near-elite defense with an elite ceiling. But I don't exactly know. Maybe 2023 or last year's offense for USC was better than the 2022 offense. And USC finished top 25 in SRS. I viewed them as a top 25 team at the end of the season last year. That was all with a horrific defense. Imagine what they could be. And I think what they will be, at least in a few years, with a much better defense, because I really like the staff moves that Riley made, and I think we're already seeing dividends of those staff moves being paid in this spring game. Again, with the interceptions, I think there were 4, maybe 5 of them, at least 4 by the secondary. I think there was a 5th one by a defensive lineman on a tipped pass, which was just awesome. That's why the defense won by a score, I believe, of 40-24. Like, the offense nearly matched the 24 points that were given to the defense in the beginning, but for every interception, the defense got 3 extra points, and they even had a pick 6, which is just incredible. So I think it was 40-24, or maybe it was 43-24. I don't exactly remember the final score. But the defense looks better. The defensive line and linebackers still have a ways to go, and I think stopping the run and getting to the quarterback but overall the unit looks better. I think the key that we should be looking for in this defense is not just improvement of the players and the execution of the scheme, but also the changing of the scheme and the adaptation of the defense. This unit has made great strides. I think they have or may have top 25 potential this year, but I think that's the best case scenario. I think the best case scenario for this defense is they barely get inside the top 25. I don't think this defense has elite potential or near elite potential. Maybe at their peak, and probably not for every game of the season, they can be great. I'd say even good is stretching it, but right now they look much better compared to where they were last year or even in 2022. Riley made the right moves late. He should have fired Grinch after 2022 and made the staff moves that he made this preseason at the beginning of last preseason. But it is what it is. I think he made the correct moves, and I think they're going to pay off this year, but more importantly, I think they're going to pay off in the future. The Trojans are low in returning production, which is always important when a new staff comes in and needs to get veteran players and talented players with starts, with snaps to build the defense around. But sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes when you have a plethora of players who've just been taught the wrong way or they've been poorly trained, poorly recruited, poorly developed, sometimes you need to root them out. And USC, I would say, is at a fork in the road this year. Now, I think they'll be at another fork in the road again after 2024, regardless of how good they are or bad they are. I think the only way they aren't in a fork in the road after 2024 is if they win the conference or reach Indy or make a playoff run or win it all. And while those things are possible, they're not guaranteed, and I would say are more unlikely than likely at this point. Returning 50% of their production entering this season means that USC has an opportunity to come out and explode with new faces. If everything goes right, the ceiling of this team is insanely high. The staff has the incoming transfers they want. They clearly have the quarterback that they want. Just looking at how they've recruited and developed both in the portal and through high school, it seems like they're expecting the offensive line and the entire defense to take a step forward. And special teams, USC, they return players on special teams. Zachariah Brandt should be even better at returning kickoffs and punts. At kicker, Dennis Lynch comes back, and Eddie Kazaplicki returns too. That's a solid kicker, a solid punter. So I think the staff overall expects an improvement entering this season. If USC improves mightily, they play it to their ceiling, this team could win it all. And this is probably going to be the lowest ranked team in my top 25 and even power rankings that I think has the potential to win it all. Their ceiling is insane. And I think that will be exaggerated in what will be a down year of college football. I mean, you might see USC play sometimes this year, and even if they're not the best team in the country, there might be moments where you think, oh my gosh, this team could beat anyone if they play to their ceiling. But I think there are other times where you may look at them and think to yourself, wow, like what a waste of talent. I think this is going to be an up and down year for USC, and I've said that time and time again. But I think overall, whether it's reflected in their record or not, I think this team will be better than last year. Last year's team was consistently bad, consistently underperforming. And by bad, I don't mean bad nationally. They were a good team nationally, but bad by USC standards and by the preseason expectations that most people had for them. I was lower on USC compared to most people, and I apparently wasn't low on them enough. Apparently me having them top 15 wasn't low enough, which is insane, but in retrospect, it's like, that makes sense given the fact they brought Grinch back and lost the offensive line and receiver pieces that they had after 2022, and their transfers on defense and even at the wide receiver position last year didn't work out to the degree that many, including myself, thought. But they've brought in 12 transfers now. They added another transfer, cornerback from Florida State, just a few days ago. So 12 transfers as a part of their 2024 recruiting class. Miller Moss, I think he's the Big Ten's best quarterback. He certainly could be. We don't know right now, but he has that potential. And the receivers will be elite. One of the best receiver corps in the country and in the Big Ten. I think the defense will improve, especially at defensive back, and I think also at linebacker with the return of Eric Gentry and Mason Cobb and the incoming transfer of Easton Mascarenhas Arnold and Rays John Davis being an experienced senior in a backup role, projected by ourlads.com. That's a very experienced linebacker room. Mason Cobb played on good defenses at Oklahoma State. Eric Gentry is just an athlete for sure, really good. And I think that, especially in the backfield defensively and at linebacker, which is the quarterback of the defense, you will see strides and you will see better adjustments in play calling and in tactics throughout the season and throughout games. I have questions regarding USC's physicality, and I've mentioned this before. I think it will take longer than just a preseason of work for that to be fixed. And if you disagree with me, look no further than Ohio State. I mean, Jim Knowles is a genius. He's a genius. If you want to dismiss Jim Knowles, look at Michigan. When Don Brown was replaced by Mike McDonald, the defense took strides forward, but it wasn't the defense that Michigan had last year overnight. It wasn't even at the level the 2022 defense was. If you had an elite running back and an elite offensive line and good play calling combined, Michigan's 2021 defense couldn't stop you. It was very similar to Ohio State's defense in 2022. He had a great O-line, great running backs, good play calling. You were going to blow up that defense. And those defenses, both 2021 Michigan's and 2022 Ohio State's, got blown up in the majority of the big games they played in. Michigan lost to Michigan State and Georgia in 2021 with that great defense, but beat Ohio State. And Ohio State beat Penn State, but lost to Michigan and lost to Georgia with that good, at times great defense. So I don't think the expectation should be this defense to be elite this coming season. The expectation should be field the top 50 defense and reload on offense. And if USC does that, they're certainly going to be better than they were last year, whether that's, again, reflected in their record because they should have a very tough schedule. We'll see. But I think USC's goal this year should be to come out strong, beat LSU, at least cement a win over a good team, a physical team, and improve their overall record compared to last season. Will they do that? Only time will tell. But I think the spring game was encouraging for USC rather than discouraging. I liked what I saw. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. And if you want to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon page and sign up as an all-conference, all-American, or Heisman member. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.